At 74, I never thought I'd be abandoned when I needed family the most. But the day I was rushed to the hospital, lying unconscious, the doctors called my son, and he coldly said, "I'm busy." I stayed silent at first, but what I did after I woke up changed everything. My name is Harold Bennett, and I'm 74 years old. I've worked hard my entire life. 45 years as a machinist, building a steady living, raising a family, and making sure my son Mark never wanted for anything. My late wife, Diane, used to say I had hands of iron and a heart too soft. And maybe she was right, because when she passed away 5 years ago, I poured everything I had left into being there for Mark. I thought he'd be there for me too. Most mornings, I live a quiet routine. I wake early, make myself a cup of black coffee, and sit by the kitchen window watching the sun stretch over the neighborhood. My little house is modest, but it's mine. The walls covered in pictures of Diane, of Mark's childhood, of family holidays that now feel like distant echoes. That particular morning, I felt weaker than usual. It started with dizziness, then sharp pains in my chest. I tried to brush it off. Old age, I told myself. But when I collapsed on the kitchen floor, the world faded to black. I woke briefly in the back of an ambulance, sirens wailing, voices urgent around me. A paramedic leaned over. "Stay with us, sir. We're almost there." And then nothing. When I regained full consciousness, I was in a hospital bed, the room humming with machines. A nurse smiled gently. "You're lucky, Mr. Bennett. You had a mild heart attack. We stabilized you. You'll need rest, but you'll recover." Relief washed over me, until she added quietly, "We tried calling your son. He said he was busy." At first, I thought I'd misheard. "Busy?" I croaked. She shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, he said he couldn't come right now." The words hit harder than the heart attack itself. My son, my only child, the boy I raised with every ounce of strength I had turned his back on me in the moment I needed him most. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling tiles, memories of Mark's childhood flooded back. The nights I worked overtime so he could have new school shoes. The weekends I gave up rest to coach his little league team. The pride I felt watching him graduate from college, even though Diane and I had gone into debt to make it happen. All of it, dismissed with two cold words. "I'm busy." When the doctor came in later, clipboard in hand, I asked, "Did my son call back? Did he check in?" The doctor hesitated. "No, but sometimes people don't know how to handle emergencies. Maybe he'll come later." But he didn't. The first night in that hospital bed was the loneliest of my life. Nurses checked on me, offered water, adjusted the monitors, but no familiar face came through the door. No warm hand to hold mine. No voice to say, "I'm here, Dad." I lay awake, the machines beeping softly, and realized the truth I had avoided for years. I met little Mark unless I was useful. When Diane was alive, she kept us connected, kept love flowing. But without her, our bond had thinned, and now it had snapped entirely. Still, I said nothing. To the doctors, to the nurses, to anyone. I let Mark's betrayal sit heavy on my chest, alongside the dull ache of my heart. But deep down, something was shifting. Because while I was weak in body, my spirit had never been sharper. And though my son thought he could dismiss me with "I'm busy," I would find a way to show him otherwise. The following morning in the hospital, I woke to the clatter of trays and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes in the hallway. Sunlight streamed weakly through the blinds, painting the sterile walls in stripes. I shifted against the stiff sheets, the fore tugging at my arm, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. Then the ache in my chest reminded me. Heart attack. Hospital. Alone. A nurse named Carla walked in with a gentle smile. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. How are you feeling today?" "Tired." I admitted. "That's normal. You're stable, but you need to take it easy." She set down my breakfast, lukewarm oatmeal and a cup of orange juice, and adjusted my monitor. "Any family visiting today?" The question stung. "No," I said softly. "Not today." Carla gave me a sympathetic look, but didn't press further. All day, I waited for a call, for a knock at the door, for Mark to appear, even just for 5 minutes. But instead, The hours dragged by, filled only with the mechanical beeping of the monitor and the distant chatter of families visiting other patients. In the room next to mine, I heard laughter, children's voices, a man's deep chuckle, the gentle murmur of a wife. They came and went all day, bringing food, flowers, comfort. I turned my head toward the wall and closed my eyes, trying not to let the envy show in the corners of my heart. By the second day, reality had set in. My son wasn't coming. The doctor stopped by in the afternoon, flipping through my chart. Your recovery is on track, Mr. Bennett. If things continue, you'll be discharged in a few days. I nodded. Thank you. Then, hesitant, I asked, Did you try calling my son again? He glanced up, his expression guarded. Yes. He said he was tied up with work, but that he'd check in soon. Soon. The word hung bitterly in my mouth. I thought back to all the times I'd been busy, too busy in truth, but never too busy for Mark. When he broke his arm falling off his bike, I left my shift early and sat beside him until the cast was set. When he called from college, panicked about bills, I wired money I didn't really have. When he needed help moving apartments, I drove 3 hours with my old truck to carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs. And now, when my life had been dangling by a thread, he couldn't spare a moment. That evening, Carla returned with fresh linens. She glanced at the empty chair beside my bed, then back at me. You know, Mr. Bennett, sometimes people don't realize how important their presence is until it's too late. Don't take it too hard. I gave her a weak smile. You've been kinder than my own son. Her eyes softened, but she didn't respond. The loneliness weighed heavily. Meals came and went, untouched sometimes because I had no appetite. The nurses tried small talk, but I could see the pity in their eyes. The silence from Mark was louder than anything else. On the third day, I finally mustered the strength to ask the nurse if I could borrow the phone. My hands trembled as I dialed his number. It rang 3 times before he answered, his voice flat. Dad? What is it? I swallowed hard. Mark, I'm in the hospital. I had a heart attack. They tried calling you. I know, he said curtly. I'm swamped at work. I'll come when I can. When you can? My voice cracked. Mark, I could have died. There was a pause on the line, then a sigh. Dad, you're okay now, aren't you? Look, I'll call later. I'm busy. And just like that, he hung up. The receiver grew heavy in my hand as the silence pressing around me. I set it down slowly, staring at the floor, my chest aching, not from the heart attack, but from the betrayal of my own blood. That night, I lay awake, staring at the darkened ceiling. For the first time, I let myself believe the truth. To my son, I wasn't priority. I wasn't even a thought. But as the anger grew inside me, something else sparked too, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. If Mark thought I was too weak to matter, too old to deserve respect, then he was about to learn the greatest lesson of his life. Because my silence wasn't surrender. It was the start of a plan. On the 4th night in the hospital, I couldn't sleep. The monitors beeped steadily. The hallway lights cast a dull glow through the doorway, and the clock ticked painfully slow. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my chest aching, not from my heart, but from something deeper. My son's words, "I'm busy," echoed in my head, again and again, like a cruel drumbeat. I thought about all the years I had given him, the hours I worked double shifts so he could have new sneakers when all I could afford were patch boots, the times I drove him to baseball practice, even after 10-hour days at the factory, the sacrifices Diane and I made, so he could go to college without drowning in debt. And this was my reward? Cast aside like an afterthought, as if my life had less value than a meeting on his calendar. I turned my head toward the window, where the city lights twinkled in the distance. My reflection stared back at me, an old man with gray hair, lined skin, and tired eyes. For a moment, I almost believed the lie, that I was finished, that my days of meaning were behind me. But then, like a spark in the darkness, I remembered Diane's words. She used to place her hand over mine whenever I doubted myself and say, "Harold, you are stronger than you know. You've built a life with your bare hands. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." Tears stung my eyes. My son might see me as weak, But I still had strength. I still had purpose. And I would prove it not just to him, but to myself. That night, I made a silent vow. I would not beg for his attention anymore. I would not sit quietly while he dismissed me. If Mark believed I had no worth, then I would show him just how wrong he was. And when I did, he would regret every cold word he'd spoken. The first step was regaining my independence. I couldn't afford to depend on him. Not for care, not for comfort, not for anything. I still had my pension, savings Diane and I had tucked away, and the small house that was paid off years ago. I would use every bit of it to stand tall again. The second step was protection. If Mark saw me as a burden now, what would stop him from circling like a vulture later, when he realized there might be something to inherit? No, my money, my home, my legacy would not line the pockets of a son who abandoned me. It would go where it mattered, to causes Diane cared about, to people who truly needed help. And the final step, the one that fueled me the most, was making sure Mark saw it happen. He needed to witness the consequences of his choices. He needed to understand that respect is not optional, and neglect has a price. By the time morning came, my mind was sharper than it had been in years. When Carla, the nurse, came in to check my vitals, she smiled. "You look different today, Mr. Bennett. Stronger." I smiled faintly. "That's because I've made a decision." She tilted her head. "About what?" "About my life," I said simply. "It's time I take it back." Later that afternoon, I asked to see the hospital's social worker. We went over discharge plans, and I made sure every note in my file listed my house as my primary residence. No mention of Mark. No calls to him. I would walk out of here on my own terms. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered to Diane's photo I kept in my wallet. "He thinks I'm too weak to matter, but wait until he sees me rise." My silence had carried me through betrayal, but from now on, my actions would carry me through revenge. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, I had more than just a folder of instructions and a bottle of pills. I had a plan. Carla, the nurse who had shown me kindness, wheeled me out to the curb. "Got someone picking you up?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "No, I'll call a cab." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't argue. She knew the truth by now. My son wasn't coming. As the cab pulled up, I settled into the seat and gave the driver my address. But halfway there, I leaned forward. "Actually, can you take me downtown? Corner of Maple and Fifth." The driver nodded, and off we went. My first stop was the office of an old lawyer friend, Mr. Donnelly. He had handled small matters for me in the past, and when I walked into his office, he looked up in surprise. "Harold, it's been years. What brings you here?" I lowered myself into the chair opposite his desk. Steady but determined. I need to protect what's mine. I need to make sure my son has no claim on my house. My savings, nothing. He abandoned me in the hospital. That told me everything I needed to know. Mr. Donnelly leaned back, studying me. "Are you sure? Cutting him out is a serious step." I nodded firmly. "I'm sure. If Diane were here, she'd agree. Family should be about loyalty. Respect." He showed me neither. For the next 2 hours, we went through every detail. My pension, my savings, my will. Mr. Donnelly drafted documents that locked everything into a trust. With beneficiaries, I chose myself. A large portion would go to the local children's hospital, some to a veterans charity, and another portion to a scholarship fund in Diane's name at the community college. When I signed the final paper, a strange peace settled over me. My son's coldness had cost him more than he could ever imagine. Step 1, complete. Next, I went home. My little house was dusty and stale after weeks away, but the creak of the floorboards, the smell of old wood, and the faded curtains all wrapped around me like a warm blanket. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. I spent the next several days reclaiming it. I aired out the rooms, scrubbed the counters, and polished the floors. Each task, though tiring, gave me strength. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't weak. I was alive, and I was capable. Neighbors noticed quickly. Mrs. Jennings from across the street brought over a casserole. "We thought you might have passed on. Harold, house has been quiet. Good to see you back." I smiled. Good to be back. As I settled in, I also began making quiet moves with the bank. I visited the branch manager, a kind woman who had known Diane and me for decades. I need to make sure my accounts are secure. I told her no one else has access, and I'd like to set up automatic donations to these charities. She reviewed the forms, then looked at me with respect. Mr. Bennett, you're making a powerful statement. That's the point, I replied. Meanwhile, I kept my distance from Mark. He hadn't called, hadn't checked in, and I didn't reach out either. I wanted him to stay in the dark, to keep thinking of me as weak, dependent, maybe even desperate. His arrogance would blind him, and that was my greatest advantage. Every night, I sat in my recliner with Diane's photo beside me, reviewing the steps I'd taken. The house was secured. The money was untouchable. The will was ironclad. But there was one more thing I needed: timing. Revenge wasn't just about protection. It was about revelation. I wanted Mark to see what he had thrown away, to know that his selfishness had cost him everything. And when that day came, it wouldn't just be about money or property. It would be about dignity. Mine restored, his shattered. Once the paperwork was done and my house was back in order, I knew it was time to move from planning into action. It wasn't enough to protect what I had. I needed to live again, to stand tall in front of the very people who thought I was finished. The first step was physical. The heart attack had left me weak, but I refused to stay that way. Each morning, I laced up my worn sneakers and walked around the block. At first it was slow, one step at a time, my chest still tight. But every day I pushed a little further. The neighbors would wave as I passed, some even cheering me on. "Looking strong, Harold." Mr. Peterson called from his porch one morning, and little by little I was... Next came the house itself. It had been sitting too long without care, and if I was going to make it my sanctuary, it needed life. I hired a couple local handymen for the heavy jobs, roof repairs, plumbing checks, but the rest I did myself. With my old toolbox in hand, I tightened cabinet doors, replaced hinges, and even sanded down Diane's favorite rocking chair until it shone like new. Each repair was more than just maintenance. It was a reminder that I was capable, useful, and far from done. While I worked, I thought often of Mark. I wondered if he even noticed my silence. Weeks had passed since my hospital stay, and he hadn't called once. A part of me ached at the thought, but another part was glad. His absence gave me room to build without interference. But I wasn't content with just surviving. No, my revenge needed to be seen. So I began making small, deliberate moves in the community. At the senior center, I volunteered to teach woodworking classes. My hands, though slower than they once were, still remember the feel of the grain, the weight of the tools. The other seniors lit up with joy as they carved simple boxes and birdhouses. "You've got the patience of a saint, Harold," one woman told me. At the library, I offered to read to children on Saturdays. Their little faces, wide-eyed and curious, reminded me of Mark when he was young. They hung on every word, and their laughter filled the quiet corners of my heart. Soon, word spread around town. People began stopping me in the street to say how much they appreciated what I was doing. For the first time since Diane's death, I felt connected again, not as someone's burden, but as someone's pillar. Meanwhile, I made sure every donation from my accounts was public. The Children's Hospital, the Veterans Group, the Scholarship Fund in Diane's name, all announced my contributions in newsletters and local papers. My name was there for everyone to see. Harold Bennett wasn't a forgotten old man. He was a benefactor, a man leaving behind a legacy. And yet, through it all, I remained silent toward Mark. I wanted him oblivious, thinking I was still weak and dependent. I wanted him to live comfortably in his arrogance, because when the truth finally reached him, the blow would be all the heavier. One evening, after a long day of sanding a bookshelf of the library, I sat in my recliner, sipping tea. Diane's photo sat on the table beside me, the candlelight flickering against the glass. "You'd be proud of this, Diane," I whispered. They thought they could throw me away. But I'm building something stronger than ever. I leaned back, closing my eyes. The house was alive again. The community respected me. My finances were untouchable. The foundation of my revenge was solid. All that remained now was a reveal, the moment when Mark would finally see what he had lost. And I would be ready. It happened on a Sunday evening, 3 weeks after I'd left the hospital. I was sitting on my porch, sipping tea and watching the sun dip below the trees, when I saw Mark's car pull into my driveway. The sight made my chest tighten, but not from weakness this time, from anticipation. He stepped out in a crisp suit, as if he'd come straight from work. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between irritation and forced concern. For a moment, he just stood there, hands shoved into his pockets, staring at the house. Then he walked up the steps. "Dad," he said flatly. "Mark." I replied, leaning back in my chair. "Didn't expect to see you." He frowned. "I heard from a neighbor you've been back here, working on the house, giving money away. What's going on?" I raised an eyebrow. "What's going on is that I live here now. This is my home. Always was." "You should have told me," he snapped. "You scared me, disappearing like that after the hospital." I chuckled softly. "Scared you? When the doctors called to tell you your father was unconscious, you said you were too busy. That wasn't fear, Mark. That was indifference." His face reddened. "That's not fair. I was in the middle of something important." I set my cup down and leaned forward. "More important than your father's life? More important than the man who worked his hands raw, so you could have shoes on your feet and a college education? Tell me, Mark, what could possibly have been more important?" He shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I stood, slow but steady, and gestured to the house. "Look around. Every wall, every board, every nail in this place. I built it, and now I've restored it. On my own. You call me weak by your actions, by your silence. But this house is proof I am anything but." Mark's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you let me help?" I laughed bitterly. "Help? You couldn't spare 5 minutes for a phone call while I was fighting for my life. You've shown me exactly what kind of help you offer." His voice rose, defensive. "I'm your son. Family is supposed to stick together. And yet you cut me out? You've been donating money left and right, setting up trusts. What about me? What about your legacy?" There was the truth laid bare. It wasn't concern that brought him here. It was money. "My legacy," I said slowly, "isn't measured in what I leave to someone who abandoned me. My legacy is in the children's hospital I funded, the scholarships in your mother's name, the veterans who will sleep easier because of me. My legacy is respect, kindness, and dignity. You don't get to claim any part of that." His face twisted with anger. "So that's it? You're cutting me out?" I met his eyes, unflinching. "I'm not cutting you out. You did that yourself. The day you told the doctor you were too busy to come, the day you made me realize I meant nothing to you, that was the day you lost your place in my life." Silence hung between us. The only sound was the chirping of crickets in the twilight. Finally, Mark shook his head. "You'll regret this, Dad. One day, you'll wish you had me around." I straightened my shoulders. "No, Mark. One day, you'll regret not having me around. And when that day comes, remember, it wasn't me who walked away. It was you." He glared at me for a long moment, then turned sharply, marching back to his car. The engine roared to life, and in seconds he was gone, taillights vanishing down the road. I stood on the porch, the night air cool against my face. My heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with triumph. The confrontation was over, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. After Mark's car disappeared into the night, the silence that followed didn't feel heavy. It felt freeing. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for his call, hoping for his approval, or begging for his presence. I had closed that chapter. The following weeks were some of the most peaceful I'd had in years. My mornings began with slow walks around the garden, the scent of roses and freshly cut grass filling the air. I cooked my own breakfast, sipped my coffee by the window, and read the paper cover to cover, without interruption. Simple things, yes, but they were mine. More than that, I threw myself into the community. Every Wednesday, I taught woodworking at the senior center. The old men who joined me laughed like boys as they sanded wood and hammered nails. proud of the birdhouses and boxes they built. One even said, "Harold, you've given me a reason to get out of bed again." That meant more to me than any half-hearted word from Mark ever could. On Saturdays, I read books to children at the library. Their wide eyes and endless questions filled me with energy. "Mr. Bennett," one little girl said after story hour, "you tell the best stories." I couldn't help but smile. The local paper even ran a small article about my donations to the Children's Hospital and the scholarship in Diane's name. They called me a pillar of quiet generosity. When I read those words, I felt tears sting my eyes. Diane would have loved that. She always believed in helping others, and now her name would live on, tied to opportunities for young people. Meanwhile, whispers about Mark reached me through neighbors. At the grocery store, Mrs. Doyle shook her head. "I saw your son last week. He didn't look well. Stressed. Worn out." Another neighbor added, "He's been complaining about money. Said something about his father turning his back on him." I didn't gloat, but deep down I knew the choices he made were catching up to him. Then one evening, Emily, my granddaughter, showed up at my door. She looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot. "Grandpa, can I come in?" "Of course," I said, stepping aside. She sat at the kitchen table, her eyes downcast. "Dad's angry with you," she began softly. "He says you've cut him out, but I wanted to see for myself." I poured her a glass of lemonade and sat across from her. "What do you think, Emily?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I think Mom and Dad were wrong. You're not a burden. You've always been there for us." Her words warmed me more than she could know. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." We talked for an hour about school, her dreams, her worries. She asked me to help her with a history project, and when I pulled out some old tools and showed her artifacts from my workshop, her eyes lit up. As she left that night, she hugged me tightly. "I'll come back soon. I promise." For the first time, I felt a small bridge forming, a chance that maybe, just maybe, the next generation wouldn't carry the same bitterness her parents had. As for Mark, he didn't come back. Weeks turned into months without a word, but I no longer longed for his presence. I had found meaning elsewhere, in my community, in the children I taught, in the neighbors who valued me, and in the legacy Diane and I had built together. One quiet evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in gold and crimson, I sat on my porch with Diane's photo beside me. I whispered, "They tried to make me feel worthless, Diane, but I've found my worth again, and it's stronger than ever." The crickets chirped, the roses swayed gently, and a deep calm settled over me. Mark's cold words, "I'm busy," had once broken my heart, but in the end, they had pushed me toward something greater. Peace, purpose, and the knowledge that my life still had meaning. And that was my true victory. Months rolled by, and with each passing day, my strength grew, not just in body, but in spirit. My walks turned into mile-long strolls. My woodworking classes at the senior center expanded so much that we had to request more space. At the library, the children began asking for me by name. "Is Mr. Bennett here today?" They'd ask eagerly, and when I opened a book, their little voices hushed into perfect silence. I had become, in a quiet way, a man of value again, not in the eyes of my son, but in the eyes of those who actually cared. The community recognized it, too. One afternoon, the mayor stopped by my porch with a plaque. "Harold Bennett," he said, smiling, "for your contributions to our town, for your generosity and service, we honor you." My hands trembled as I accepted it, tears threatening to spill. For years, I had been told I was nothing more than a burden. But now, my name meant something again. Meanwhile, news of Mark and his struggles reached me like whispers on the wind. At the barber's, a man muttered, "Your boy's been having trouble at work. Missed deadlines, snapping at people. Folks say he's distracted." At the grocery store, Mrs. Doyle leaned close. "I saw Rachel the other day. She looked tired, worn out, said things have been strained at home." It didn't surprise me. When you build your life on pride and selfishness, the foundation always cracks. One evening, as I was trimming the roses in my yard, Mark showed up unannounced. He looked older than his years, his shoulders slumped, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. He stood there for a moment, as though unsure how to begin. "Dad," he said finally, "things have been rough. Work's a mess. Rachel's upset all the time. And I keep thinking about what you said." I set my clippers down, wiped my hands on a rag, and studied him. "And what did I say, Mark?" He swallowed hard. "That respect isn't optional. That silence is the same as turning your back. I realize now I failed you." His voice cracked, and for the first time in years, I saw not the man who had dismissed me, but the boy who once ran to me after scraping his knee, tears in his eyes, trusted me to make it right. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. I sighed, my heart heavy but resolute. "Mark, I don't know if you can. You let me lie in a hospital bed alone. You let pride and selfishness blind you. But if you truly want to change, start with your children. Teach Emily and Jack what respect looks like. Show them that love means being present, not just when it's convenient, but always." He nodded slowly, shame etched deep into his face. "I'll try." We didn't hug. We didn't reconcile fully. But in that moment, I saw a spark of humility in him, a seed that might grow if he let it. As for me, I didn't dwell on whether he'd change or not. My life was too full to waste on waiting. My legacy was already secure in the donations, the scholarships, the community that respected me, and in the laughter of Emily and Jack when they came by to visit me, because they did more and more. Emily often sat at the kitchen table, working on her school projects with me by her side. Jack loved the garage, where I taught him to build simple shelves and stools. "Grandpa," he said one afternoon, grinning wide, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Those words meant more than anything Mark could ever say. That night, as I sat in my recliner with Diane's photo glowing in the candlelight, I whispered, "We did it, love." They tried to strip me of my worth, but I found it again. And now, it lives on, not through Mark's greed, but through the next generation, through the people who see me as I truly am. Mark had once dismissed me with, "I'm busy." But now I was the one too busy. Busy living, busy giving, busy thriving. And in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all.